In hindsight, I always knew, but I'd say around 6 or 7, I really had a strong inclination of what was to come. My uncle was up from Virginia. He was working on his master's in social work at Columbia, and he took me to see Paul Robeson and The Emperor Jones. And there's a scene where Paul Robeson comes out and he's bare chested, and I just remember like, oh, I just want to like touch him because he's large, burly black man, and it just like attracted me. I wrote my mother a letter. I was moving out of my house, my parents' house, to live with my first long-term partner, and I, I just couldn't muster up the I wouldn't say the courage. It was just like I just couldn't get the words in place, and there was the opportunity to do it. So I just figured, just take pen and paper in hand, and I wrote it all out and left it in my, what was to be my former bedroom, and moved out. Her initial reaction was she was not thrilled, as most parents are not thrilled when they come to the realization about their child. But as time went by, I was self-sufficient, so it wasn't like I was relying on my family for anything for me to get by. I had a job and apartment, a car. They saw that despite what they thought was a detriment to my life, I was living my life to the fullest. They were not happy with what transpired. I mean, there were a whole lot of drama. Um, you know, there were family events that I was disinvited to, and instead of letting it break me down, it made my reserve much stronger because there were and are those people within my family that were and are supportive of me and my relationships. So it was good to see that and have that support. And I think being partnered with Oliver and just hanging in there for all these many years is a good thing. We're an example to not only the gay community, but to the community at large. I have a wicked sense of humor, so I was always good with, a snappy one-liner, and that got me out of a lot of sticky situations. Of course, there was always, the childhood taunts because I listened to classical music, I played the violin, and it wasn't so much of being called a faggot or a sissy. It was more so of, you're trying to act white, and it's like, well, this is what I like. Not to sound all Joan Crawford, but I knew where the boys and the booze were, and I took full advantage of it. The public library in Mount Vernon was quite well known as a meeting spot for gay men, in the men's room, obviously, and I was there a couple of times a week. So my parents are thinking, oh, he's so, diligent with his schoolwork. So it was quite, quite an interesting experience because although I could certainly reconcile with the physical aspect of my sexuality, it's like the emotional aspect I didn't come to grips with until much, much later. Remember in '69 when Stonewall happened, sitting in the kitchen with the television on, watching them cover it on the news, and it just there was just something about it that I immediately clicked with. Black community has a sort of tenuous experience with the gay community because you can go into any black church, from Akron to Aspen to New York City, and you'll see gay people there. If they're not playing the piano, they're singing in the choir, and there's sort of a quiet truce that is there. It's like, well, we know that they're there and they're doing that stuff, but they're not talking about it. I remember being like 4 or 5 years old, and there were some flamboyant types in the neighborhood, and they'd wear bright yellow pants and a lavender shirt tied around the waist, and it was just like, and people had respect for them because they had the balls to go out dressed like that, and if somebody said something to them, they would bring it right back to them. They would confront them, and if case need be, they'd pull a knife on them. The black community is having a difficult experience in trying to reconcile those thoughts, because there's the whole church situation, just trying to reconcile religion with freedom. That we understand on the one hand that people need to be themselves, but yet they're still holding on to these religious values that may or may not fit well with their own personal beliefs. First thing I would say, to take baby steps. You shouldn't try to jump into the water all the way. And especially those that live in a large metropolitan area like New York City, where there are tons of resources out there, is to seek them out and to seek the advice and counsel of your elders. I remember when I went off to school, I was 18 years old. Actually, I started going to bars when I was 16 because I had facial hair, and I still had a big afro, big hair back then. But you could go into a bar, and there were guys that would talk to you, and they would tell you about, what it was like, 20, 30 years ago. And I was fascinated by all these tales they had to tell. And I think that that's missing, that oral history that needs to be passed on from, old gay to new gay.